All right, let's get into it. And so we find ourselves in Metropolis, where Superman is having a little bit of a problem because there is a maladjusted lens on one of the cameras at Lex Luthor's office. And he ends up knocking over an entire shelf of figurines in the process of trying to correct it. It's no big deal. Jimmy Olsen snaps a picture of the damage, but when he goes to develop it, it turns out that the picture itself looks absolutely fine. However, in the negative, Jimmy sees a strange set of markings which almost appear to be Kryptonian. Later that night, while Superman is hanging out with his pal Jimmy Olsen and his crush journalist Lois Lane, they take a trip to the Fortress of Solitude, where the advanced technology scans Lois's body and discovers that she and Superman are completely incompatible on a molecular level. This means that if they were to have a child, it would almost certainly kill her. Of course, Lois doesn't care and is willing to take the risk anyway. But Superman is understandably pretty upset about this. Meanwhile, back at Lex Luthor's office, after discovering the apparently mysterious markings on the photo, he took Jimmy runs it through some computer software that Lex has given him, which reveals that the marks are not from this world at all, but from Krypton. Lex becomes excited at this revelation and heads off to one of his secret facilities. There he uses the kryptonite that he stole from Brainiac in Superman 2 to amplify the Fortress of Solitude scanning equipment in order to use it to scan Lois as well. He determines that she is indeed of Kryptonian origin. Lex decides to free 3 criminals from their extra-dimensional prison, encouraging them to conquer the Earth. And so we find ourselves at the Daily Planet, where Lois is trying to figure out what's going on with Superman. He seems to be completely checked out lately, not showing up to work and seeming uninterested in stopping any of the major threats that are facing Metropolis. His pal Jimmy Olsen is worried about him, but thinks that maybe a good night's sleep will help. Meanwhile, the 3 Kryptonian criminals released by Lex Luthor are laying waste to the countryside, and a heroic Superman arrives on the scene to stop them. But in spite of his best efforts, he is utterly powerless against these new villains. They're too strong, fast, and durable for him to defeat in combat, and they quickly overwhelm and imprison him. While Superman is trapped, the 3 criminals head back to Lex Luthor's secret facility, bringing Superman with them as a trophy. After binding him with special Kryptonian bindings, Lex reveals to them that he already knows that Superman is a Kryptonian, and so he welcomes them to their new home. Meanwhile, realizing that Superman hasn't come home for dinner, as they say, Lois Lane and Jimmy Olsen head off to the Fortress of Solitude to see if they can get any answers. However, the fortress, upon sensing Lois's presence, reveals to her that Superman's biological father was indeed Jor-El, the scientist who helped them escape Krypton. In other words, Superman is related to these new villains. But before Lois can ask any more questions, the fortress reveals to her that Superman's power is fading away. His cells are breaking down at a molecular level, making him weaker by the second. The only solution is to remove his powers, turning him into a mortal. And even then, there is no guarantee that Lois and Superman could have a child together without killing her. But Lois doesn't care and demands that the fortress help her make this sacrifice. She asks the spirit of Superman's mother, Lara, if she believes that this is the right thing to do. And Lara, seeing the genuine love between Lois and her son, gives her blessing. And so it is that Superman learns that he might be related to these new villains. But before he can do anything about it, Lex hits him with a device that weakens his powers, then takes him to a secret chamber underneath the Fortress of Solitude, where he removes Superman's suit, leaving him helpless. Lex explains to him that since he is a Kryptonian, he needs kryptonite to survive on this planet, and so he has been draining the fortress of its kryptonite reserves to keep himself alive. With Superman powerless, Lex leaves him in his cell, seemingly prepared to let him die. But then, in a surprising turn of events, Superman realizes that all he has to do to restore his powers is put the suit back on. While Lex is out retrieving more kryptonite, Superman does just that. Except instead of being restored, he is instead engulfed in red energy, indicating that his power is returning, but at a much slower rate than before. Superman struggles against his bonds until they break, and he flies off to confront Lex. In a moment of inspiration, Superman grabs some rocks and throws them at the control panel that Lex has used to siphon the Fortress of Solitude's kryptonite reserves, overloading it and causing it to explode. Just as it explodes, Superman removes his suit, allowing Lex to see that he is no longer powered by kryptonite. Just as Superman had hoped, Lex is shocked and horrified, believing that Superman is dying. Lex attempts to flee but is stopped by Jimmy Olsen, who has arrived on the scene to help. And so we find ourselves back at Lex's secret facility, where Lois and the spirit of Lara watch as Superman arrives with an unconscious Lex in tow. Despite losing his powers, Superman manages to defeat Lex in hand-to-hand combat, taking him to the Fortress of Solitude to be imprisoned. And so it is that Superman says goodbye to the spirit of his mother. He strips off his suit and hands it to Jimmy Olsen to keep safe. And then he and Lois embrace, finally able to consummate their relationship. But as the two lovers embrace, we pan away, and the spirit of Lara watches sadly as Superman's cells continue to break down around him. This time next week, though, he'll be entirely human. Next week, the destruction of the Earth begins. This is the last episode of the series, and it is definitely one of the most controversial, thanks to its portrayal of Superman and Kryptonian society. Some fans have interpreted this version of Superman as an allegory for Jesus Christ, who also performed miracles, turned water into wine, and died for the sins of humanity. So I want to know, what do you think? Is there any truth to this comparison? Let me know in the comments below. I've been your host. Until next time, stay classy, or at least try.